Liverpool, horrific attack. I use the word attack because people were attacked. Now, we don't know the motive of the suspect who is in custody. No charges have been brought as yet. We do, though, know a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area has been arrested. Police were very quick to say this. We knew this long before we even knew how many people had been injured. That press conference was about 11 o'clock last night. 47 hurt, 27 to hospital, 4 people, including a child, trapped under the car, 4 children taken to hospital. I mean, unbelievably sad and horrific scenes. Scenes that made a lot of people very angry. People attacking the car, the police having to take the driver of the car sort of into a police van for his own protection at one point. What do you make of the incident? The fact that a car was able to drive in these circumstances? We don't know the motivation. We're told it's not terror, but also the information the police gave out.
No, first of all, you want to start with the tragedy, the horror of the thing itself. I mean, it is incredible that at least at the current time, no one has lost their life, considering the speed that car ploughed into people, the number of people who ended up in hospital, even small children being pulled from underneath that car. It's incredible and horrific for the football club and for the city. And then you do have to ask questions primarily about why was this car on that street at that time. This was a huge operation, a huge policing operation, a huge event that is taking place in the city. Why was you ever having pedestrians and cars using the same space? Was always a terrible idea. That's not to strip the person who allegedly committed this of any agency, but it's just to say it's one consideration. We're starting to see some reporting tumbling out about him potentially having recently left a bar and so on. So all of those details will come out in time. Your discussion then turns to how the information has been managed this time around, and you can't help be struck by the contrast between what happened after Southport. We had this very slow drip feed of information, and we're in this situation where not only got the kind of profile of the attacker very quickly, there was also a level of detail that we don't normally see. Him referred to as a white British male was something.
This is simply not, unless the police are saying we're searching for this man, this is what he looked like, it's what he was wearing, when the colour of the skin would be very relevant. Okay, man, colour, height, you know. Why was it relevant that he was white? I've read out to a police guest a little bit earlier on the show, about half an hour ago, and the last sort of, you know, like 5 tweets announcing a suspect being arrested or charged by Merseyside police, this police force, and none of them mention colour at all.
No, it's certainly something that you just don't see, whether it's Merseyside police or any police force. Those 2 responses to those 2 incidents seem very different, but there is one thing that connects it, which is an assumption that the public are going to kick off because they're racist, and if they find out that, for instance, in the case of Axel Rueda-Cabana, this was a young black man of Rwandan heritage, or in the case of this particular attacker, he seems to be a white gentleman. If you weren't not forthcoming with that information, but very forthcoming with that information, all hell would break loose. And I think that's something which the police really need to get over. I understand that there is only so much they can say at certain junctures. It is important, and people should know.
And Axel Rueda-Cabana, bearing in mind, was 17. So
which did inform a little bit.
But neither of these circumstances. Yeah, as long as you're not naming somebody.
It wouldn't have made any difference, as you say. So the thing they need to get over is this idea that the public are a problem to be managed. Because actually, perversely, well, obviously, in the wake of Southport, we did see those horrendous riots that went on for days and days. They were the flames of that were, at the very least, fanned, shall we say, by a lot of online scumbags with big followings who were purposely pumping out false information, because they always do that after every attack, no matter who committed it, because they've gotten a certain agenda to push and they're willing to push it. You created the space for them to do that by being so cagey. So if you drop these prejudices about the public, you might not make it so easy for people to spread prejudices
to exploit
online.
it. And exactly what's interesting, last night on social media, I was being told by people, oh, you're a bigot, you're a file, this, because I simply said we can only speculate why the police choose to give more information on some attacks than others. And people go, oh, because bigots like you with your accounts, you'll encourage bigots to be out on the streets. Like, you know, talking about, you know, if it's a Muslim or a asylum seeker. I didn't mention anyone's skill. I didn't mention anyone's religion or any motive, because I don't have that information. And I haven't done it. But the only people talking about it are the so-called woke left. Fascinating. I checked just sort of the first 30 accounts that called me the C word. All of them without exception, had a European flag with your little yellow stars in their bio. I think they thought I was a vile bigot for voting for Brexit. They thought, by the way, you were as well. If you vote for Brexit, they thought that's about you too as well, just so you know. I mean, this is the thing. It's the elite classes who are obsessed with the idea that everyone else is a horrible racist bigot and unable to control their emotions. And we know from the HM Constabulary report into Inspector Constabulary report into the riots that it wasn't. Most people were not motivated. Most people who rioted were not motivated by any political views or religious views. They were the ideological views. They were simply the people who were rioting, as opposed to people who were peacefully protesting and were upset and angry. The people who were rioting and throwing bricks at police were a bunch of wrong-uns who mostly had a string of convictions already for violence. So, I mean, it's just... Keir Starmer has said... asked if he would like to see similar details released in future about cases, about details about the man. He said, that is a matter for the police and the investigation is ongoing, so I think we need to leave that to them. I think today says it's a day really for thinking about all those impacted by this and being absolutely clear that we stand with them. The Liverpool City Mayor, Steve Rotherham, has also asked questions about... When he said it was the police were absolutely right to release the suspect's ethnicity. He defended the decision, claiming nefarious groups have been trying to stir up speculation on social media. Again, I think most people, when they saw a car plough in, apparently deliberately, repeatedly into a crowd of people, were not unreasonably considering the strong possibility it could be an Islamist extremist terror attack.
I mean, that's...
The police will have thought that as well.
No, absolutely. There's certain attacks which have a certain
modus operandi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have a certain, but you know, the Nice truck attack or the Berlin van attack of a few years ago.
Westminster Bridge.
The Westminster Bridge, of course, which began with him ploughing into pedestrians before jumping out with knives. It fits a certain profile. I think one thing that we're starting to realise is, and this is why genuinely it is good to wait for more information to come in, whether it was the Magdeburg attack in Germany just around Christmas, where it seemed at first very much to be an Islamist attack, turned out to be a very deranged individual, an ex-Muslim who thought the German state were too pro-Islam for some bizarre reason. And in this case, where we don't know anything, but it doesn't seem to point towards any kind of ideological motivation, whatever. So another example of why it's always good to wait for more information to come in. But how about the police be more upfront with the information they're giving us and also be consistent in what information they're willing to give us. Because by releasing that information in the way that they did last night, they almost made things worse for themselves as well, because that extra detail of him being white British has just been another...
That was information apparently we couldn't have learned before because it would have prejudiced a trial. I mean, that's the thing. Even the Prime Minister after Southport, I mean, he was defending the fact that we weren't aware that, you know, ricin had been found and terror manuals, because they were so insistent it wasn't a terror attack, and yet this guy, because they weren't sure what the motivation was. I mean... Again, stop treating us like mugs. That's all I say. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And again, the main thing is that, thank God, no one died. That's the main thing. But there are an awful lot of people, very, very traumatised, people pulling their children out. I mean, it is an absolute miracle that we didn't see people die. Let's also talk about what Nigel Farage is going to announce. Winter fuel allowance, return to all pensioners. Again, as and when finances allow. Again, if reform came in 28, 29, are we assuming that they'd have any more money than Labour will? Apparently, we've still got all these massive black holes. There's talk about how there's £30 billion in tax rises that Rachel Reeves' a chance going to have to find, because actually they've already run out of money. And again, you know, the cost of borrowing goes up. But also ending the two-child benefit cap, but also marriage tax allowance, tax breaks for married couples being able to share their tax allowance. So basically, what that does is it enables usually mum to stay at home and have kids in a way that she wouldn't be able to do so, because there's basically an extra tax benefit there. Would you support any or all of those?
Well, I think individually one can argue over them. It's a bit like something like the winter fuel payment. When people say, you know, isn't it a bit of a crazy situation? We have even quite rich pensioners who are in receipt of this. It's something, you know, in the kind of cliche, you know, using that money to heat the outdoor swimming pool, you know, rather than actually being in need. The problem is... That's
someone I know.
The issue is with... the benefits like this, certain ones of them are made universal for the very simple fact that if you were to try and means test it, it would become an incredibly expensive and incredibly bureaucratised process, and therefore you might as well just give it to everyone. I think in this case, the reason that Reform are particularly willing to say that they're going to scrap it is that it's really cut through with people. I think when you're talking about benefits, particularly for older people, that has a certain resonance, because these are people who kind of by definition have paid into the system, who by definition have, you know, been contributors for society for a very long time. I think those are the people that, across public opinion, are almost most reluctant to take things away from, even if they're doing all right for themselves, because you kind of think that's what any sort of social
There's an element where they paid in. And there's just an argument about universal benefits just being cheaper to administer. Again, the simple solution to this, put it into the main main pension, the £300 one-off payment, put it into the main pension, and then you can tax the richer pensioners on it. I don't see what's complicated about that. Just let you know, Nigel Farage is speaking right now. We will bring you any news on what he's had to say. I'm just massively opposed to the two-child benefit cap being scrapped. I'm very pleased when that was brought in. I think Ian Duncan-Smith was the welfare reform minister, who's work and pensions minister, who wanted to bring that in. Two-child benefit cap, as I read actually to a Reform UK representative from a friend of mine who works on the benefits desk, in the benefits nation, the job centre. That actually, it's not going to help the actual kids. You improve the income for the family, but you don't actually help the kids, because those families are already making very poor choices. Why would you keep having kids? If you can't afford the first one, don't have a second. If you can't afford the second, don't have a third or a fourth. Am I old-fashioned? Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's get straight to a phone call before we go to a break. Actually, Tina is in Birmingham, and Tina, you wanted to have your say on those reforms that Nigel Farage is announcing right now. What do you want to say?
Yeah, can I just first give my thoughts and prayers to everyone of Liverpool?
Absolutely.
Absolutely horrifying, the second tragedy that hits Liverpool.
Absolutely.
But no, I am a reform voter, and I'm with you. Don't remove the two-child cap.
Why?
Don't remove it. You have kids if you can afford them.
Yep.
My husband left me after our second child, and I went without, because I got no support off him to make sure my kids had everything. But he did have a good job. He worked at Rover, and then he left. I'm
so sorry about that. How could you not get the money? This is one of the number one things we need to sort out. Is the dads who don't pay. Well, dads or mum, whoever's left, not paying for their share of the kids, because everyone else having to help out and you struggling and the kids struggling. You have kids, you have to pay for them. End of.
Simple. Yeah, I remember asking him to get a coat. I was going to pay him, and then he didn't turn up for his child visitation. So then I ended up having to take the baby up to get his coat.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Just horrific.
If you can't afford the kids,
don't have kids. But also, I mean, are you working now, or did you go to work after they went to school, or what?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't go straight away after my youngest son was born, because I got hit bad with postnatal depression and stress. But as soon as I felt comfortable, I did go back to work. I went back part-time, working term time only.
Yeah.
Then I started my own business.
Good for you.
Which unfortunately didn't pander out as well enough to support him.
Yeah.
So,
but you did your best. I mean,
I did the best that I could.
And these are exactly. And you're exactly the sort of person that people go, well, you're trying your hardest. I mean, I'd like to have a firm word with your ex, I have to say, against the wall, pin him up. But I have to say, I feel rather strongly about these things. But at the end of the day, if someone's got, I mean, there are people who say, well, I already had 3 kids who are on benefits, but I would still say at that point, well, then you need to get a job. Would you not say? As opposed to claiming an extra £3,500 a year off the rest of us.
Yeah, I went back to university, trained to be a baker. Yeah. Then got a full-time job working as a chef as well.
Great.
Unfortunately, yeah. And now, unfortunately, I'm off on disability due to having issues with my hands. And if you can't pick up an empty fryer, you can't.
You're not much use on that. Oh, no, not much Tina, you've had a string of bad luck, and you seem to me, I'm sure our audience will agree, exactly the sort of person who, when you try, keep going, you get bad luck, life's hit you hard, you get back up again. You're exactly the sort of person that we should be helping. But I just don't want to be giving extra help to the families who are making all the wrong choices. Tina, I so appreciate your call. I hope her life is treating you better. Tom Slater, you and I were just talking about earlier, you like the view, but the damage to these kids, if parents have got 3 kids and they don't get this extra money, then that is going to hurt those children. Again, people I know working the benefits are pointing out that actually, and I'm trying to find some notes here somewhere, actually, the family income goes up, but it doesn't necessarily help the children.
Well, I think you could clearly see that there's going to be a number of cases in which that's going to be absolutely true. I mean, there's often, particularly on the left, a kind of assumption that people who are kind of on benefits in a way that is deeply problematic for themselves and for their families, dependent on it.
They're swinging the lead.
Absolutely, just taking the mick. I mean, that's something which is so clear. And when people pretend like that doesn't happen at all, they're just taking everyone for
you know
mugs,
who's most angry at those people? It's not the middle class people going like, oh, there's some people over there, but I'm not bothered. But there's people who live next door to them who get up at 6 a.m. to go to work every day and live in the same house, go on the same holidays, drive the same car, but they're going out to work all day. They're the people who are most angry about it, and understandably.
Absolutely. The whole kind of people who are really into the sort of welfarism as almost like an end in itself, like this is just a fantastic
thing. It's a patronising view of the working class.
I know, absolutely. But when you have a welfare system, as we do, and I think the vast majority of people would support it existing in some way, shape or form, there becomes choices that you make for different reasons. In this case, I think you look at the kind of projections which are made in relation to, if you bring in this particular measure, lifting 250,000 children out of poverty.
But you don't lift children out of poverty, you just give their mums more money. That's not the same as getting the kids out of poverty. It's like the kids who don't get fed before they go to school. It's not because mum can't afford a loaf of bread or a bowl of cereal. It's because mum can't be bothered to get her backside out of bed to feed them.
Those people absolutely exist. That's not clearly going to be everyone. And those are the choices you go.
Who do you think in this country, on benefits or minimum wage, can't afford to feed their kid breakfast?
I can answer the previous question, or I can answer that one.
All right.
But the point is, and I think you're more passionately against this than I am passionately in favour of it, because I don't think that welfare is the end point of everything. But I think it becomes a question about where you're going to allocate resources. And also, to be brutally frank, I think the reason this has become an issue, the reason that Reform are running with it, is because it's a bruise to punch with the Labour Party, because there's a lot of people internally who are very irritated by the fact.
And Labour MPs very unhappy.
So this is something which will cause trouble for them. And I also think it is part of Reform trying to essentially provide things that they can point to which suggest that on certain social policies and welfare policies are actually to the left of the Labour Party, which I think, even if it's not this particular measure, as a package of measures,
the sort of thing.
Is the sort of thing that will help them break down that kind of, they are the Thatcherites who want to sell off the NHS.
The British voters, kind of interestingly, are actually on social issues are very conservative, but on tax and benefits things are actually very left-wing. Interestingly, but again, I think a lot of it doesn't marry up, and again, I think that's also because people don't. So when you say, for instance, let's give an extra £3,500, best part of, to families for each extra kid after they've got two, right? So how are you also going to help other families be able to afford to have a kid, because they're paying more tax to pay for that benefit? And it's you can't have both. You can't just keep giving money to them and then expecting those other families, the strivers, as they call them, the hard-working families. Most of them are just making ends meet as it is.
I know, and it's one of those things where how these things poll depend on how you present them, depends on what kind of trade-offs. That's the thing about anything in relation to policy in this area, particularly in the quite kind of economically austere times that we live in terms of the economic shocks that we've had one after another of recent years. But at the same time, what I think is interesting is the politics around welfare and how public opinion is very different to where it was in about 2010, not least because of the fact that we've had so many kind of wasted years, paltry growth, continuing economic crises, and I think that has shifted the dial on where people feel about some of these things.
Just so Nigel Farage is speaking right now, and he has said that no one's going to trust the Tories again. He's obviously moving on to the Tory and Labour ground. We saw that in the local elections as well. Bring you some more detail of what he had to say coming up. Going to get to your messages, going to get to your calls coming in on the two-child benefit cap, but also on what the police had to say about the suspect arrested in Liverpool after that horrific car ploughing into the crowds at that Liverpool victory parade.